Honorable, the Chief Justice and the Associate Justices of the Supreme Court of the United States. God save the United States and this honorable court.
I'm Hans von Spakovsky, and this is Court is Adjourned. The title of our episode today is The Supremes Refuse to Give Aliens Carte Blanche, except in certain occasions. And you'll see that's kind of a pun on something I'm going to talk about later. As you all know, there's been a huge fight going on in this country over enforcement of our immigration laws. On one side are those, including President Trump, and actually the majority of the American people who actually believe our current immigration system and its laws should be enforced, and that means removing aliens who are here illegally, including criminal aliens. On the other side are those, including former President Joe Biden, Hakeem Jeffries, head of the House for the Democrats, and other members of the Democratic Party who are against enforcement of our immigration laws, who support open borders, and in some places have actually been supporting not just obstruction of federal immigration agents, but violence against federal immigration agents. They filed an avalanche of lawsuits trying to stop various enforcement policies of the administration. And just this week, as the Supreme Court ended its term, actually within the last 2 weeks, we've gotten a avalanche, I would call. Well, is 4 cases an avalanche? I don't like the mark.
Yeah, maybe.
We've gotten a series of cases from the Supreme Court on various immigration issues. The president did pretty well until the final day of the Supreme Court, and we're actually going to talk about these with my guest today, which is Mark Krikorian. Mark and I have known each other a very long time. He's the executive director of the Center for Immigration Studies. Actually, Mark, I think you've testified in front of Congress more often than I have.
I don't know. I don't keep count, but it's a lot either way.
He's written several books on immigration issues. He has a master's degree from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, which is a very well-respected school, and a bachelor's degree from Georgetown. And he has researched and written about many of the problems we have in our immigration system. So, Mark, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. So an avalanche of cases would be like an exaltation of crows or whatever.
Before we get to the biggie, the birthright citizenship case, let's start with several of the other ones. I mean, 3 cases all in a row that the Trump administration won. I actually said I think the American people won,
right,
because they upheld what he did. Let's talk about those. I mean, first was Mullen v. Doe. Mullen v. Doe was a case involving temporary protected status. So to tell folks kind of what that means and what you think the court did.
For people who follow immigration, it will be no surprise that the T in temporary protected status essentially has meant nothing for 30 years.
Right.
The point of it is to give people, illegal immigrants mainly, although maybe some in some cases tourists or others who are here, a temporary way to stay when there's some kind of disaster back home.
Right.
And the main point of it is to give them work permits, because ICE could always say, okay, well, we're not going to deport anybody for 180 days until the airport is back running, whatever it is. So the point of TPS, Congress passed it to impose some order on that system, because executives had just been letting illegal aliens stay and just handing out work permits to them. So it was the point of it was to add some structure and oversight. The problem is the temporary part never becomes temporary. It's supposed to be good for 12 or 18 months.
All right.
It's been renewed over and over and over again. And the reason the case went before the court is that President Trump, originally in the first administration and now again, has tried to let some of these grants of TPS expire. He's not canceling anything. He literally is just saying, okay, when your 18 months is up, then the temporary part kicks in, your work permits turn into a pumpkin, and you need to go home.
Right.
And that's what caused the lawsuit.
And we should mention, I mean, the two groups that made it to Supreme Court were Syrians and Haitians. The Haitians, I think, they were granted TPS in 2010 because of an earthquake that hit the island, which was 26 years ago, and they...
No, 16 years ago.
16 years ago, right.
But it's even worse than that, because most of the Haitians here who have this TPS, again, they're all illegal aliens. They came across the border illegally, or they were already illegally here. But the ones who came across the border under Biden were already living in Chile or Brazil, because those countries had taken in people from Haiti, gave them work permits. Their kids, they have birthright citizenship there, so their kids were citizens of Chile or Brazil. What happened was, when Biden issued his invitation to all the illegal aliens in the world to move to the United States, they decided to trade up. So it's not even an issue of people who, left the disaster that Haiti really is. It's people who were already firmly resettled. They had businesses, they had jobs, they had families. One of my analysts, who's now in Homeland Security, he went and talked to some of these people in Costa Rica and elsewhere. And one of them, this young Haitian man, said, why'd you go to Chile? He said, well, life's 1,000 times better in Chile than in Haiti. And he said, well, then what are you doing here trying to go to the United States? And he said, life's 1,000,000 times better in the United States than in Haiti. In other words, they're economic migrants, all of them. And so, but the issue that the court dealt with wasn't specifically Haitians. It was, does the president have the authority, or the administration have the authority, to allow these TPS grants to run out and expire? And the statute says that these determinations are not reviewable by courts. It actually says it in black and white. So this was more a victory for the English language than even it was for the administration.
But it was also a victory of basically slapping down what I call the renegade federal judges.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because all these judges issue an injunction saying, Mr. President, you can't do that. But the Supreme Court came out and said, 6-3 we should mention, is that no, the statute says there's no judicial review, so that means there's no judicial review.
And the lower court judges were the sophistry was amazing that in what they were trying to, this is a case that should never have reached the Supreme Court. It was preposterous. But it's good to see that it was, ruled the right way.
Right. Okay, and then we had the Mullen versus Al-Atro Landro.
Ladro. The other side is what it means.
Yeah. And this was about aliens who had been actually blocked from crossing the border. Now, this actually started during the Obama administration, right?
Yep.
And they claimed, well, okay, yeah, we didn't make it across the border, but we still get to claim asylum.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't understand that on the border, whether it's on the bridges across the Rio Grande or on the land border in Arizona and California, the border inspectors, the place where you go and you show your passport and whatever, they're inside the United States already. You've already entered the United States because they don't have the guy right there on the border. But the point is, once you cross, then they can just say, I want asylum, and you end up with people, gaming the system. So what, again, they started under Obama, was they would have agents right at the physical line, actually on the bridge, because they'll have a plaque on the bridge over the Rio Grande, and there'll be a line, and it'll say, United States of America, Mexican states, or whatever. They'll have a guy standing right there, and they're saying, okay, well, what's your story? And if they don't have a visa or something, or they're not an American, they keep them out. And so the point of this case was whether a foreigner who is not in the United States yet has to be treated as though he's already in the United States. And it's kind of funny that the people who brought the case was al otro lado, which means the other side. But so what? Again, this was a victory for the English language, because the court said, look, in the United States means in the United States. It doesn't mean not in the United States. I mean, in a sense, they're not even aliens yet, because if you're a foreigner in Mexico, you're not an alien under our law because you're not in the United States.
Right. But again, this is another case that it should never have gotten to the Supreme Court, because the actual language of the statute, as I read, is you can't claim asylum until you've entered in the United States.
Yep.
And yet, the most shocking thing, I guess not shocking, but the scary thing is that, once again, we had 3 justices who said, well, the word in doesn't mean in.
Yeah, it's kind of Clintonian. It depends on
Right.
what the meaning of the word in is.
Right,
You know?
right. And Sotomayor said, well, as long as they arrive on the doorstep
Yeah.
of the United States and claim asylum, which, you know, you and I are both homeowners. By the way, Mark throws this great Christmas party that I've been to.
Armenian Christmas party.
Armenian Christmas party. That's like saying somebody arrives on your front porch, they're in your house.
Right, exactly. Yep. Or they're on the sidewalk and therefore they're on your property, but they're not. They're on the sidewalk. You know?
Right, right.
So yeah, this should never have reached the Supreme Court.
Right.
But it's important. It's an important win for the administration.
Yeah, and just the final thing I want to mention about it is that, I mean, the reason the Obama administration put this system in is because the numbers of people trying to get in was so large that border agents were being overwhelmed.
Right.
So it wasn't that they completely shut the border, but they set up what they called a metering system.
Yeah.
So they only allowed a certain number in. And they could claim asylum, but
Right.
the rest they were keeping out.
Right, exactly. It was try to extend some control over the flow at the border.
Right. Okay, and then we had another decision, again, the administration one, called Blanche v. Lau. And this had to do with actually a permanent resident alien who was Chinese, left the country, was coming back from China, and it turned out that he had been criminally indicted with trademark counterfeiting.
Mm-hmm.
And he got upset because the customs agent at the border, rather than simply admitting him, which permanent resident aliens normally just get admitted, said, oh, well, you've been criminally charged. I'm paroling you into the United States. I mean, that was the issue, right?
Right. And the reason that's important is they paroled him in to stand trial, is that if you formally admit someone, that's a legal term of art,
Right.
then you have to deport them if you're going to get rid of them. What the ruling said is the administration had the authority to parole them in, which is a kind of a different form of letting somebody in. It's not a formal admission. So you don't have to formally deport them when their purpose of the parole is completed, which in this case would be standing trial.
Right.
They would be escorted back to the border. It simplifies things a lot. So this was a win for the administration, but it was a relatively narrow issue, unlike some of the other two, which were of much broader policy relevance.
You know, what struck me again, and we keep saying it's keep being 6-3 decision. What struck me again was the three liberal justices were saying, well, the customs agent shouldn't have paroled him at the border. They should have just admitted him unless he had clear and convincing evidence that he had committed the crime. And it's like, how is a customs agent?
Right.
How are they supposed to do that? Were they supposed to hold a trial, you know, at the airport to try to figure that out?
That's the point, is to make it impractical to do that so that they would
Right.
just let them in and admit them.
And we should point out that when they actually held the hearing for the immigration judge, they had clear and convincing evidence because he'd pleaded guilty
Right.
to this, which is a felony, which gave
Yep.
them the ability to remove him from the country.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Okay, well I should mention, you know, we're talking about the Supreme Court, but I think almost on the same day as one of these cases, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, they actually released a decision, a case called Make the Road New York versus Mullen, that approved expedited removal, which the administration had been putting in. That's a significant decision too.
It's
right?
a significant decision, and it's another one that should never have reached the court to begin with.
Right.
Should never even have reached the circuit court, because expedited removal is something Congress invented in 1996 to, as the name suggests, expedite removal.
Right.
And gave ICE, well, INS then, but now ICE, authority to remove people without having to go before a judge if they haven't made an asylum claim.
Uh-huh.
And Congress said they could do that to people who had come into the country within the past 2 years. The problem is administrations had used it, even in Republican ones, only in narrow cases. In other words, they didn't use it to the full extent of the statute's
Right.
allowance. The administration is just saying, okay, well, Congress, this is what it says. We can read English. And so we're just applying it. as the statute for the full extent of the statute's authorization. Why did that even reach? I'm not even sure how that's actionable. I have no idea. But anyway, it was an important win because it expedites the removal of illegal immigrants. That's the whole point.
Well, to how it got to the court, again, I think there was actually a dissenting judge in the Court of Appeals decision. If you look at it, he had this bizarre, the dissenting judge has this bizarre argument that, well, prior administrations didn't fully enforce the law, so they can't decide now to fully enforce the law, which makes no sense,
No, it
whatsoever,
doesn't at all.
and has no legal basis.
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, look, Congress authorized that. The administration doesn't have to use the full powers that Congress gives it, but it has those powers if they want to use them.
Okay, so we had 4 good wins, and then we get to the last and final day of the Supreme Court, and we have the case about birthright citizenship case, and there we had a loss for the administration. I also think a loss for proper interpretation of the citizenship clause, with really, I think one of the best dissents I've ever read by Justice Thomas, another one by Justice Alito, and kind of a strange concurrence by Justice Kavanaugh.
A partial concurrence.
Partial, right.
Because the president was never going to win this case. He basically, through executive order, was trying to change our current citizenship practices.
Right.
So that, because the way it is now is if you're born to, your mom is an illegal alien, or a tourist, or a foreign student, or a foreign worker, or frankly, a diplomat even, except diplomats with full diplomatic immunity. Everyone else, 90% of the people working in the British embassy here, if they have kids, they're U.S. citizens. It's crazy. The president wasn't going to win that because you can't do that with executive order. I'm not even sure I would have. I mean, I think I would have sided with Kavanaugh on this, where the president didn't have the authority to do, statutory authority to do this. But the question is, could Congress change our current citizenship practices if they wanted to?
Right.
Kavanaugh said, yes, they can, but Roberts and Barrett sided with the 3 Democratic activists, saying, no, it's constitutionally fixed that anybody born here is automatically a citizen. And, times have changed, and the law needs to be responsive to changing times. And what this decision did is take this issue out of normal politics in a way that Dred Scott did, in a way that Roe versus Wade did, and it's not healthy.
No, and actually, it's very interesting. It's a very, very long opinion.
It's like 200 pages almost,
yeah,
right?
But what Thomas and Alito point out is that Roberts, when he's going through the supposed history of this, gets it all wrong. I mean, he gets it all wrong, and they basically ignore the fact that the sponsors of the Citizenship Clause, which was in the 14th Amendment, one of the Reconstruction, the sponsors, and for apparently like the first 70 years, everybody understood that you not only had to be born in the United States, but you had to have political allegiance to the United States.
And that's the issue in the amendment. It says people born here subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
Right.
That's the phrase of art, and the question is, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And, there were no illegal aliens back in 1866. There wasn't mass tourism, mass foreign students, mass foreign workers. None of that stuff existed. It was about freed slaves.
Right.
And so, but my point here is that Thomas and Alito were right in their analysis of the issue. On the other hand, we've been doing it this way for a long time now, and Congress has passed legislation in 1940 and 1952, not defining what subject to the jurisdiction means, which would help if they had. They just repeated the words. So it seems to me the sensible thing would have been to say what Kavanaugh did. President doesn't have authority to do this, but Congress does, and when they do something, then we'll take another look at it. I thought that's what Roberts would do. It seems like the kind of thing that would be, the Chief Justice would want to do, because it's narrowly tailoring the decision, and yet he sided with the Democrats on this.
I gotta wonder whether really gotta wonder whether this was because of politics. And what I think about Mark is, remember, I think the biggest mistake of his career on the Supreme Court was the Obamacare decision. And remember,
Right.
it came out
A
that
tax is not a tax or
he
whatever.
actually agreed with the four justices who were dissenting, that they were
Right.
going to rule against it. And apparently, at the last moment, the stories are that he thought it would be too big of a political hit on the court if they did it, and he changed his mind.
Right.
Instead of sticking
For
to
political reasons.
yeah,
right.
for political reasons.
Except that for political reasons, to me, would have suggested to do what Kavanaugh did. And I'm not saying he did it for political reasons, but would have been to say, we are ruling only on the most narrow part of this case,
Right.
which is, can the president do this or not? And so this actually, to me, suggests Roberts was going beyond the kind of prudential concern of narrowing of avoiding making sweeping social or political statements, and he ended up doing basically kind of pulling an Earl Warren here.
Right. Now, look, before we got going, you were telling me that, I mean, there's only a small number of countries in the world that actually recognize birthright citizenship. Australia is one of the countries that used to and got rid of it. Did France also did?
Yeah, France did, Britain did. And the interesting thing is most countries have come up with some kind of provision to avoid having adult native-born illegal aliens. So they have a kind of statute of limitations, if you will. Australia's, the way they do it, is unless you're born to a citizen or their version of a green card holder, you're not a citizen. So
Right.
if you're a tourist or a student or whatever. But if that kid lives the full, uninterrupted first 10 years of his life in Australia, then he gets citizenship. And again, this is to avoid these sort of what would be a kind of democratic deformity where you have native-born people who are adults and aren't citizens. And that seems like a sensible
Right.
approach to it. It looks like we're going to have to now, either have a constitutional amendment, or maybe if the makeup of the court changes, they could, force this decision again to the court and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, we should mention there were actually three dissenters.
Right.
So it was Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch. Kavanaugh said, well, they concurred in the result, but he didn't think it violates the 14th Amendment. It's
Right.
just the statute that Congress has passed. So if
That's what I'm saying. So there's four people
right.
who are open to democratic decision-making on this. And so,
Right.
again, if the makeup of the court changed, it could change.
Yeah, all we need is one more.
We keep saying that.
One more
over.
justice.
We've been saying
and,
that for 40 years.
that would fix the problem. I wanted to ask you about one other thing. You guys put out a study that I thought was just remarkable about the number of, the administration, the latest numbers I saw is that they've been able to find and deport, about 750,000, but you guys came up with a report with a huge number of people who have actually self-deported
Right.
on top of that.
Yeah, that wasn't based on administrative numbers. That was looking at Census Bureau surveys.
Right.
And the numbers sort of fluctuate some there. So, our estimate at that point was that the foreign-born population overall had declined by 2 million or so people, most of whom were illegal. Subsequent data has sort of come up with a somewhat smaller number, but it changes because it's
Right.
a survey, so it fluctuates. But there's no question, significant number of people have left on their own, and that is the way they're going to be reducing the illegal population. Because there's not enough ICE agents in the world to grab up every person
Right.
and throw them out, and it's a waste of their time to be going after guys at the Home Depot. They need to be arresting mainly public safety threats, people who've been ordered deported but just flipped the bird to
Right.
the government and stayed. Regular, non-threatening illegal aliens still have to go. The way you get them out is through self-deportation, and the key thing to there is work-related enforcement.
Right.
And this administration is not doing enough of that. And if you're not a rapist and you're not a murderer, you're just a regular illegal alien working stiff. If the administration, the president is talking about the worst of the worst, it's like, I'm not the worst of the worst. I'm going to keep my head down and take my chances.
Right.
The numbers you can't make a real dent in the illegal population without going after illegal employment. And so far, the administration has been kind of ambivalent on that question.
But the number you guys have cited for self-deportation, I mean, do you think that's the result of the wide publicity over in the enforcement efforts?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's the fact of Trump even before they do anything,
Right.
you know what I mean? And then all the enforcement efforts. And they are doing things like they're trying to make it harder for illegals to get bank accounts.
Right.
Under George W. Bush, Treasury actually issued a regulation authorizing banks to open bank accounts for illegal aliens. I mean, so they're doing a lot of things, and that's causing the illegal population to go down. But in a sense, this is a low-hanging fruit issue. The ones who have already left are probably the most recent arrivals, people who don't have. Getting more illegal aliens to go is going to take more effort, and they're doing some of that. But I'm not pleased with the constant worst of the worst talk, because obviously rapists and murderers have to go. But it's regular.
Well, not according to the blue state governors.
Okay. True enough.
Yeah, Pritzker of Illinois, Spamberger of Virginia don't agree with that.
True enough. But survey data shows most Democrats, even ordinary voters, agree with that. The issue is regular illegal aliens. Look, they're not supposed to be here. They got to go. And if you don't want them arrested, then, in other words, if you don't want ICE to grab them up, well then
make it impossible for them.
Make it impossible for them to stay here, which would be work, driver's licenses, bank accounts, all that stuff. So it's impractical to live here, and people decide, okay, the party's over, let's pack up the car and go home.
Boy, there's a lot more we could talk about, Mark. Anybody who's watching this can see how much Mark knows about this. So we're going to have you back. Mark, I try to end my shows with a classical movie review.
Okay.
And I try to find something that's related to the topic or the person. So I actually found a 1939 movie called Secret Service of the Air, starring Ronald Reagan, future governor and president, in one of his first roles, and he plays the hero, a former military pilot who's recruited in the Secret Service to do what? Infiltrate a smuggling ring that brings Mexicans into the
I've got to look
States.
for that, because we have a movie poster collection of immigration-related movies,
I don't know if you
and I
can
hadn't
find
heard of
this.
that one.
He's recruited because the prior undercover agent was killed by the smugglers.
Oh, interesting.
This is one of 4 movies in which Ronald Reagan played a member of the Secret Service. He once referred to himself as the Errol Flynn of B movies.
It's probably a good analogy.
Right. I think if you actually watch this movie, the only thing that really has changed in our fight against illegal human trafficking since the 1939 movie is that today, liberal blue state governors like Pritzker of Illinois, Newsom of California would consider Reagan actually the villain of this story instead of the hero, and would no doubt be helping the smuggling ring and cheering them on. This is Hans von Spakovsky. Court is adjourned, and be sure to follow us on Spotify and YouTube. Thanks.
Before we take off for the States, I want to give you some instructions. Our field is about 5 miles from Palm Springs and about a half a mile from the main highway. After you land, split up as soon as possible. There are several roads leading to the main highway, and you can take any one of them. If anybody stops you to ask questions, tell them you've been in the United States for years.
Just a minute, Leroy. Which of you men is Durrell?
Right here.
Oh. Well, if you want to get into the States, it'll cost you $1,000.